Yeah, so far we have covered getRecord, that is a wire adapter, the JavaScript API that we have seen. We have seen how it takes the record input as a parameter and how it does create the record for us. We have also seen how we can create the records that are related with each other. What are all information it does takes and how we can modify it as per our need. So today what we are going to say is we are going to look into another wire adapter method. Today we are going to talk about the wire adapter. So we are going to look into this method called getRecord, and that is again provided by the uiRecord API library. And this is the syntax as we talked about, right? The wire method is going to return either a property or a function. So we will see both ways. When it does return a property, how to access that property, and when it does return a function, how to access that function. This is a syntax. It actually takes so many things, and out of all these many things, record ID is required, which actually takes a record ID of a record that you wanted to fetch the information about. It takes the fields. It could be either a single field or it could be the array of fields. Most of the times we are going to use a string of arrays of fields because we would really wanted to get the information about the fields, multiple fields. And then there is a field, something called optional fields, where you can also provide the optional fields like information about a user record, who is owning the information, who is owning that record, maybe last modified date, and some other related information, could be system generated information. Okay. This is again this is another example where we have taken like record ID. Then you can also provide the layout types. It could be full or it could be compact. What is the mode? It could be edit, view, or read only, and then the optional fields. Most of the time we'll be working on the top one because the again, as we said, right, we would always wanted to have the reusability in our code, no matter which code we are using. As we talked about, I think in the starting we were talking about the reusability where we were referring to a variable within wire method. So we will also see how to refer that variable within the wire method, and you would be able to see how to dynamically refer a variable within our wire method. Now we are also going to talk about a method called getFieldValue along with this getRecord. This getFieldValue is really important when you want it. You have a list, you have a record from the wire method, that is getRecord method, and you wanted to access a field information. You can access using this parenthesis like this.account.data, and then for the field, whatever the field you have. This is again an imported field on the top. Here we have imported the phone field of our account. We will see how to do that. So to get started, this time we are going to create another component, and then we are going to name that component as LDS getRecord. And before we start doing anything, let's move to our HTML and have a lightning card with some title LDS getRecord. Okay, so this is the simple and very basic HTML that we have. Now let's talk about a JavaScript. So the very first thing that we need is we need to import the getRecord method because we really wanted to get the information about a record. Now let's consider a scenario here. Let's say that we have a requirement of using this component within the account record detail page, where we wanted to read the account record ID and then display some of the information, like account industry, account revenue, what is the account phone number, what is the account rating. These are some of the key fields that we wanted to display the information. So how we will do is, we really don't need to go to the Apex class, fetch the information using the SOQL query, because we already have this getRecord method, and we talked about this requirement is very simple. So first thing that we will do is we'll import the method that is getRecord. And we also know that this getRecord actually comes from the module called Lightning uiRecord API. And then we have also talked about there is called getFieldValue. Okay, these are the two methods that we are going to cover here. Now, as you know that we are going to utilize this component within the account detail page or maybe contact detail page, we can utilize @API decorators to get the record ID. And we can also get the object API name. Okay. This is what we have got about the two fields. Now what we want is we want to get the record information. And what all fields we want, we have talked about in our requirement is that we want the name, industry, rating, annual revenue. These are the maybe phone as well. So these are some of the fields that we wanted to get the information about. So we really need to import these fields. And these are the fields of our account object. Okay. So to import, you already know the process. We will use import and then we will give the name. Let's say that name field from. We are going to go to Salesforce, read the schema. And then we are going to go to account object and then the field that we wanted to read, that is name. Similarly, we are going to do the import for other fields as well. If anyone has any questions in between, please feel free to interrupt me and I would be happy to take your questions.
Just to simple question, there is no syntax issues, right, while importing the fields? Like I mean to say, like since we give right name underscore field, so I usually prefer to give like as it is, like name, phone, industry. So there won't be any issues, right?
No, this is just a name. You can use any name.
You just okay.
Yeah, this is just a variable name, right? So like it is always, if you ask me, the best practices, it's always like you should always give the name and then say field, because that way it would be easy for anyone to read who is reading your method. So okay, so that's what we have. Now let's talk about how we are going to utilize our wire method. So first of all, we have to import this wire method here on the line number 1 from our LWC library. So we'll say wire. Now we need to use, so what is the syntax of our method? Wire method is, so just do @ and say wire, because wire is also a decorator. Okay, then use opening and closing parenthesis, and the very first parameter is going to be your adapter, and adapter is nothing. This is the name of your method and this is our method. So we will say getRecord. Okay, and then again, if you hover over your method, you will see that there is another parameters. It says config. This is the config, right? So how you are going to pass is you are going to use a comma, use opening and closing curly braces. Here we are going to pass the information that we need. So which information we need is, we need to pass is fields or optional fields. Okay, so we will say okay, and before we pass fields and optional fields, we have one more attribute which is required, that is record ID. So we are going to say record ID, comma. Now if you can use, like if you have a record ID like this, you can have 001 and some dummy. This is your account, dummy account record ID, right? You can provide like this. But if you say that, okay, I have a variable here, and in this variable, I'm going to have the value of my account record ID. So how you're going to use is, it's not about record ID only. Any variable that you wanted to use within your wire method is, you have to use a variable name colon and then use single quotes, use the $sign and paste your variable name. That's how you're going to dynamically refer this variable in your wire method, in your wire decorator. Now this is giving an error. You could see here there is a red sign error that we are getting, because we have to either provide the property or a function. So let's say that we are going to say account and the error is gone. Okay, but now we really need the information about fields. So what we have to do is, after once we have done providing the dynamic variable to our record ID, we need to use a comma and say fields. And as we talked about, this is going to be most of the time, this is going to be array. So we are going to provide the values that we have just imported. So we'll say name field, phone field, industry, rating, annual revenue. And we got all these fields and we are done. Okay. Now, if you wanted to display the information, whatever you have got. Now, whenever you are using the syntax of your wire method like this, so whatever this it has, it is going to return two property. This is an object. Okay. This is going to be an object equivalent to this. It is going to have a error property. Error is an object, and it's going to have a data property. Data could be of any type. Any means it could be an object, it could be an array, it could be an string, it could be an integer, decimal, any type of data type it could be. Okay. So this is how your syntax is going to, if you're using this syntax, so you have to say this becomes your variable now. This is your variable, the property at JavaScript top class label. And this is another attribute within this property, error and data. If you wanted to access it in your HTML, you really have to do, let's say we're going to use template and we will say if true. And this is our account variable. First of all, we will check if there is value in account variable. Okay. Then we could have a division tag. And then we are going to have a if condition here. We'll say if true, account dot data. That means if there is any information on account dot data. Okay. And then here we are going to print the information. For now, I'm just going to say print account info. That's what we have. Okay. And before we deploy it, there is one thing that we are missing is we need to export this component in order to become available in our Lightning app builder. So we'll say LDS getRecord. And I'm going to utilize it within the 3 default targets that we have, or maybe let's only utilize it within the record page. Okay. So we have made this simple changes. Let's deploy the code. And then see, after adding this component into the account detail page, we will only be able to see this print account info, but we would see how we can print the information later on. Any questions so far? Someone was saying something? So this is our component LDS getRecord. I'm going to get rid of the other components that I have within my account detail page. Okay, you could see, right? We've got print account info. There is no such error, nothing. We are not able to get it, and we are not able to get any errors, or we're not getting basically any error. Now we really wanted to print this information, so how we are going to print it? Now, if we have to get the information for any information from this data, what you have to do is you have to take use of this method, which is get field value, coming from again Lightning uiRecord API, and then getter methods, getter of our Lightning Web Component. So how we will do is we'll say, okay, get and the name of our variable. So let's say we wanted to get the name. So we will say name, and get method always return something. So we will say return get field value. And here what we will say is this is our variable. And if you remember, whenever we create a variable at a JavaScript label, if you wanted to reference within our method, we will say this dot the variable name and then data, because data is something which is going to contain the information about the complete information about the record. And then it is going to take one more field, that is which field you wanted to get the information. So you just need to say name field. Okay. And let's also do the console here. Okay, we'll say console.log, and we are going to say this dot account.data. This is the one console that we wanted to put. And the second one that we wanted to put is about name field. And now to print this name, we could have a paragraph here, and then we could just say P as in a paragraph and use the variable, because we know that the getters are again nothing. These are the variables, and we can use as the normal variables we can use within Lightning Web Component. So you could clearly see here that we are able to see the information here. We are able to see the account name in the Lightning Web Component. As we have also turned the debug log, let's quickly do the right click, inspect element, and go to console. Okay, we have actually got so many logs, so not sure. Yeah, this one is basically the name field, where we had again two attributes, field API name and object API name. Then this is our object, the complete information about that object. So if you remember, or let me show you, we printed this dot account dot data. So it has printed every single information about the object, including the ID. There are no child relationship, and fields is another object that actually contains the information about the fields that we really wanted to get the information about, like annual revenue, industry, name, phone, rating, right? So we are able to see these information. And if we really wanted to traverse, this is how you can traverse is. Okay. Let me clear and then refresh this again, because I wanted to showcase how you can traverse. Okay. So if you wanted to traverse this, you can say in your JavaScript, you will say this dot account dot data dot fields dot okay. I hope everyone can see, or maybe let me filter. Okay. Now everyone can see the console clearly, right? Okay. So I've got this dot account dot data dot fields, and then which field I wanted to know, maybe let's say annual revenue. So I can go to annual revenue dot value. If you really wanted to get this, if you really don't wanted to use this get field value method, you can utilize this way to traverse the information to the fields up to like from the object to the fields. But I would always recommend, if you are using getRecord method of Lightning uiRecord API, then always use get field value information to get the information about your field. And then if you see, right, this currency value has basically two things. One is the display value, which is really important for the currencies. Okay, and this actually gives you the information along with the country code for the currency as well. So if you really have to display the currencies, like, you could use display value. How you will use display value? There is a method called get field display value that actually gives this information, display value information. Like get field value gives the information from this value attribute. Get field display value gives the information from this display value attributes. And that is actually the user sees into the UI. Right? This is basically what user can see in the UI. That is, you could see like this. If you want, you could use that one. So if you really wanted to use to test it, we can say get, let's say, admin revenue is our field. We wanted to return get field display value account.data, and then our annual revenue field is annual revenue, and utilize this in our HTML within another paragraph. Okay, like this. Oh, just do the right click and deploy it. So if we get back now and refresh this page, we should be able to see the information about our account as well. So you could see here, sorry, our annual revenue response that we are able to see. We got the rupee sign, and then we are able to see the annual revenue information that we have. And then maybe if we go ahead and change it, the annual revenue, let's say I'm going to add few more numbers here. You would see that this is also reflecting, because that's what the basic functionality of our Lightning data service is. Okay, so that's the one thing we talked about while getting the wire information about your with the property. Now let's say you really don't want it to get this, maybe you really don't want it to use. Most of the time you would not use this information like property only. You would really want it to return a method here so that you can do the proper error handling for your wire method. So how you will do is, instead of using a property, you could use something like, you could create your own method here. I would always suggest start with wired, and then as this method is going to return an account record, so you can say wired account record. Okay, and this is a method, so you would have to use opening and closing parentheses, and then again opening and closing curly braces, and then after your closing curly braces, use the opening and closing curly brace. Sorry, after the opening closing parentheses, use again the curly braces. So this is like simple. When you create the method in your JavaScript, in your Apex class, like public void method name, right? Method name, opening and closing parentheses, opening and closing curly braces. And here you really pass the parameters. So that's what it has. It has parameter. Now what we talked about, what this does return, it does return error and data. So we have to provide two variables like error and data. One thing that you really need to remember and keep in your mind is the first parameter is always going to be an error, and the second parameter is going to be data. No matter if you say data or error, this variable is going to contain the error information, and this variable is going to contain data information. So the first variable is always going to contain the error information. So you should always be write the code like this for your wired methods. Here you could just quickly say if, and you could say this dot, if data, that means there is a data, and you can say if error, that means there is an error, and we could say else if. And now you could create a variable here. Maybe you can say account record, and you can just store the values here. Let's say this dot account record equal to data. Okay, and then we can also put a console.log, and we can say this dot, data is fine for us. Now this is how you really are going to have the proper method declaration of your wire decorator. Always try to use this way. Don't use the property, because you would not be able to handle the error properly. If there is any error, you would not be able to handle. Okay, so that's what we had for wire method. Now if you notice here, we are using this dot account, but we have got this account record now. So we have to replace this with the account record. And now here this should not be data. The reason, because we are already getting the data now. We are already extracting the data. So it should be simple, this dot account records. Like this, nothing else. Because data is already there now. So we really don't need to worry about that. Let's get rid of this console as well and deploy this. Any confusion or question so far? Anyone? Okay, seems like everyone is getting very well. So now you could see here. Okay, let's refresh this again. I think there is some error. Okay, so we have got here, this is the information about our data that says that, okay, fields, which says that we've got annual revenue. So we are getting the information here in this console, okay, but we are not actually getting the information returned by these getter methods. You could clearly see here, right? We don't have that information. We have got fields, annual revenue, and all those we are getting, but after that we're not getting anything else. Okay, because the reason is that now we have to utilize the other way. We have to utilize this way, this one that we talked about, right? That's why we have, because now we are not using the direct property. We have already stored information into the data. So what we could do is we could just here now we could just do a little bit trick, or maybe instead of using these getters, I can also show you another way, that is copy this variable, go to HTML file. Now say account record dot fields dot name dot value, because you have already, okay, I made a mistake. I'm sorry for that. Okay. Anyone can let me know why we are not able to see the information in the UI. I'm sorry that get field value method does not have any problem. Can anyone tell me why the value is not getting displayed in the UI?
Account.
Sorry, your voice is very low, Surya.
If condition, fourth line, I think. There is no property of account, right?
Yeah, true. That's because it should be now account record, and this should go away. So the earlier statement that I made, that this is not going to work, that was not true. Okay. So we should be now refreshing this, and we should be able to see the information now. You could clearly see, you're able to see the information. So that's the one way, basically, that's the other way to utilize your wire decorators and get the information, store it in a variable, because in the other approach as well, we were creating a variable. So we're just creating a variable here. Maybe we could create another track variable to store the errors, so that if there is any error, we could clearly showcase into the UI. Like this dot errors equal to whatever the error we are getting. And we could just do the parsing of the error that we will look into the coming videos, and then display into the UI so that user can easily see the friendly errors, and they can reach out to the intended person. It could be Salesforce admin, or their maybe business users, or maybe someone else. They can reach out to them. That was all about our get record and get field value, get display field value, field display value method. Now let's talk about update record. This is very
One small question. So you said we cannot swap data, comma error, right? I thought it's just data and error keywords are mandatory, but if I write data, comma error should also be same thing. I'm like, even if I write error, comma data, I should go ahead and write data, comma error. Still would be okay, and I'll still get data in data and error in error. Can we quickly try it once?
we can try it. I have tried it at the starting when this came. Okay, so let's say swap the keywords, and then let's maybe do the console log. Okay, we'll say data and console log error, because I've tried. That's right, right?
Let's also write in front of them so that we know which one is data, which one is error.
Okay, sorry. This is string, right? Data.
I think it would still be, I mean, like data if clause. Let's deploy it and let's check. I thought the keywords are mandatory. I mean, like you cannot use A comma B, but use A comma B or B comma is equivalent because they are also doing destructuring thing.
Yeah, they're doing destructuring and it, okay.
It works.
It worked, yeah. I think it worked.
Because it doesn't matter. I think data comma error, error comma data doesn't work. It's just, it should always be data and error, no matter how you write them.
Okay, yeah, got it. So I think now people should be confused. Questions, I'm expecting at least questions. Anyone has any questions?
Guys, you need to ask these. I mean, like if you do not ask, then probably will think either you are getting it 100% or will think maybe you didn't get anything.
Yeah, that's true.
I think everybody's sleeping.
Maybe they are busy with IPL.
So was it?
What do you say a different way to access the values?
So you said that you can either use that this dot account records and then go to the value, right? And there is another way where you use that. What was that? Can you just scroll a little bit?
He's saying that how you were putting that in HTML, na? This dot account.
Yeah, yeah.
Dot.
Because Amit said that there are two ways actually, where we replace the values of data with the account record, and before that there was different, right? So there are two approaches where he showed that we can in console log you can traverse or traverse to that value field, value property, and then there's this way, right? So can you please explain this two again?
Yeah, sure. I think already showcased in the UI, but let's say you've got an industry field, okay? Now you really don't want it to use this get field value. So you really have to, first thing you really need to say, if you need to check whatever the record you are storing the information, maybe the variable. So in our case, the variable name is account record. So you really need to check if there is value in account record. If that's the case, maybe let's create a variable here. Let's say industry that is going to be initialized by default blank, and that is what we are going to return. And we will say if there is value in our variable that is account record, we would say okay. Now go ahead and assign the value of this dot account record. Under this account record, we've got fields. Under that account record, we've got industry. And under industry, we've got value. So that is how you could access it. And that this industry field will get populated, and then we could print it here in our HTML to get the information about. So this getter method only executes when you are using these properties in your HTML. Otherwise, getter method will not get executed until unless you have the setter method for that getter. Okay. So if you really wanted to execute your getter methods, there are I think three different ways. One, you utilize the property name into the HTML file. Second, you have a set for that variable. Okay. Let's say get set industry and say value. And maybe you could assign the value here. You could do the logic processing. And then other ways you could use this variable within your another method. Maybe you have a variable and you could say this dot industry. So these are the three different ways to trigger your get variable in your JavaScript. Now our get variable is already being referenced in our HTML. That means it's going to execute this. Okay. And then this method is going to execute how many times? Let's quickly do the console log. Console.log, and it will say industry executed. But the process is same. You really have to check if your variable has some value or not. That means it does not have undefined information. If it has some values, you really need to go this way, traverse the information and get the field value that you want. And this way you really need to know which field and which value you really wanted to get the information from. Because you cannot make it dynamic. But in case of your other value, that is get field value, you can make it dynamic. So, okay. Now you could see here we got manufacturing, that is industry, but I think we missed the logs. So you could see here industry method has been executed and we are able to see our manufacturing industry over here. So this is basically I would say this is basically the different way of accessing the method. You could, it's up to you which one you really wanted to utilize. I would always prefer to use this way because it's really short and sweet for me to know what actually I'm doing. But both are the same thing basically. We are not doing anything else, anything extra from our side. This is the method defined by Salesforce. They are doing already the checks and all and then giving the information. And here we have decided to define our own way of accessing a variable.
Okay.
Now, if you want, you could play around with this. There are so many things, so many ways to access this. You can make it dynamic. You want to make it hard coded. You can just make it anyway. And because this is an object, you can access the property multiple ways. So any further questions before we go ahead? Okay, so let's talk about update record. This is a very simple method, a very similar way to create record method. Okay, the structure and every input and everything same. The only thing that is different is because when we really wanted to update a account or a contact or any object, right? When we really wanted to update any object information, what we really have to do is we really need to know the record ID of that variable. Sorry, that record. So that is what the extra is there within update record method, which really takes the record ID as well for that record which you really wanted to update. Apart from this, every single concept that we talked about in the create record method is exactly same. It takes the record input, it returns the promise method, including then catch and error, and later on, with the help of the record ID that we are providing, or we are supplying it to the system saying that this is our record ID that you really need to update it for us. The system will go ahead and update the record ID. That's what the update record does. Let me quickly go ahead and create a component for all of us. So we'll say LDS update record. So we will start by importing the method that is import, and this time it is update record. And we really got it. Okay. Now this time I'm really going to showcase how you could really utilize what we say utilize. When I say utilize means is the import of the fields. Last time we really have not used the import fields, right? So this time what we will do is we're going to import the fields of the account object because that is where we are using our components. We'll say ID underscore field from @Salesforce schema. And we wanted to go to account and we really wanted to get the account ID. And then similarly, we could go to account name. Basically, I'm only going to showcase with one field update. You could go ahead and then extend this component for the multiple field updates. So here we have got update record, we've got ID field, we've got name field. Let's quickly go ahead and import, sorry, use the @API record ID to get the latest record ID that we have. Okay. And then have a method called handle click that is really going to call the method. So here we are going to call this method called update record. As we talked about, right, this really takes a record input as a parameter, and then it does return then, that is the promise. We talked about then actually returns a callback function with one parameter as a response. Then catch is there, error, that does return any error, and then finally is going to execute no matter if there is a success response or an error response. And this time we are going to showcase another concept of a spinner as well. Okay. So we really need to prepare this record input. Okay. So how we are going to prepare this record input is firstly we need the fields. So as we talked about, the variable name should be exactly as fields. Okay. And then we should be having a constant record input equal to, it takes two parameter. One is API name. Okay. And that should be the object API name. This time let's hard code the object API name to account. And then other is it takes fields. Okay. Now in this field, we need to provide, first of all, we really need to provide the ID of the record which we wanted to update. So we will say fields, and within the square brackets, we'll say ID field dot field API name. So this thing is going to give you, the outcome of this is going to be ID, nothing. If you want, you could just put a single code and put like this ID. It's really going to work at all. It is going to work basically. Okay. And then what value you wanted to assign, that is this dot record ID. And then we really have one field called name field. So let's also have that. So it's a name field dot field API name equal to, and let's say we are going to say LDS update record. I'm just putting a dummy value here, a static value. Okay. And this, as we talked about, right, this is basically going to give you the field API name of your name field on the account object, and that is name. So the reason I'm telling you this again and again, because I wanted to let you know that these imports are unnecessary. You really don't need to worry about importing the fields. Just go ahead. If you know the field API name, go ahead and utilize those. And then here you could say console.log as a response. If there is any error, you could say console.error. For error parameter, you should always use console. The reason you should always use console, because it will throw the error in the in the red color, and you would be easily able to understand that this is an error which is thrown by our component, and have a proper error message here that will let you to identify at which place the component actually breaking, because there could be multiple places where you are doing the error handling. So better to have the proper error messaging there. Okay, now let's go ahead and expose this component to the Lightning App Builder. And this is going to be LDS update record. Target is again going to be record page. As usual in the HTML, we are really going to have a card, a lightning card. And this time we will have a simple button, LWC:button, variant, let's say brand, label me update record. And handle click is the method. We would make sure that this is the correct name that we have given is handle click. And let's deploy this. So I tried to make it fast forward because we have already covered create record, but still if anyone has any question that you wanted to ask regarding the concept, please feel free to go ahead. And I would be, as I always say, I would be happy to answer.
The fields, right? You are saying importing is not necessary.
Hmm.
You can please explain that one.
So as I said, importing is not necessary. So what is the outcome of this ID field is going to be ID. Okay. This is nothing. This is the API name. This is nothing. This is the API name of your ID field that you always, if you query, if you have to query the account ID, how you will query? You will say ID from account. So what is this? This is API name. Now, if you have to query name, how you would query? You would say name. There is a field on the account that is active field. Okay. This is a custom field basically. I think I don't have this field in my, maybe I would see here, that should be here. Okay, but I think that's not there. But if you have a field, something called active, or maybe some custom field, right? So once you will use this concept like active field dot field API name, this is actually going to give you the API name of your field. Now, anyways, you're hard coding the field API name here in the import statement. So all I'm saying is these imports are unnecessary because we already know the API name of our field. We could directly go and say like this. We would say, I wanted to store my value in the name field of my account object. And this is my value, and go ahead and update it. That's what basically you're going to see it over here. And that's what I was trying to say. These imports are unnecessary. Now there is a use case that I would say to you is, let's say I say, okay, go ahead and create a component which is responsible for creating maybe dynamic records. Let's say I'm saying, again, as usual, the same example. It's taking the object API name. It's taking the field API name, comma separated. There is a button called create record, and I fill the information. It should create the record. You could not make this happen with this way because you would be needing the information at the runtime, which object it is, what are all fields of that object. Then you would be using this this way where you could directly go ahead and provide the name API name of your field. That's it. Okay, so that's what I was saying. Now, any questions, anyone, please? So if not, we are going to test it very quickly. So you could see here, update record is a button, and I would basically take the name of my account because I really wanted to change this back once this functionality is done. Okay. So let's go ahead and click on update record. There is an error. We got the error. That's fine. If you see here error, it says API name value should not be provided for the patch. Okay. Now we really don't need to provide the API name of our record. What it is saying is we are trying to patch a record. We are trying to do the partial update on a record, and we should not be providing the API name of which object we really are patching it. Okay. So we could go ahead and we can just go ahead and remove the API name because it's basically going to identify at a runtime which object record ID it is, and it's going to update it. Okay, let's click on update record. And this time we didn't get any error, and we got this account has been updated successfully. Okay. I will quickly go ahead and change the name because I wanted to showcase one thing. Before I go ahead and change it, let's click on update record. we see this is the response, right? Which actually tells us that our record has been updated, but we really don't see any spinner kind of things. We don't see some small dots are moving around like. So how we could add those spinners? Whenever we click on this update record, we really wanted to add a spinner like we have seen. So there is a very simple tag, and the adding the spinner is very easy. And that tag is lightning spinner, okay? Lightning spinner. It takes the size. Size is having large, small, medium. I always prefer a small. It has a variant. It could be brand, or you could leave as it is. So I'll say brand. Alternative text. So whenever it is loading, what text it should display. So I would say loading. And then when you really wanted to showcase this spinner, so I would say only showcase this spinner if true. There is a variable called is loading. And this is not a inbuilt variable. We have to define it. So in our JavaScript file, we will define it is loading. By default, we will set to false so that our spinner does not keep displaying. And once someone clicks on handle click, we are going to set the value to is loading as true. Okay. And then finally, we are going to set the is loading as false. So no matter if there is any error, if there is a success, our spinner has to be stopped. So that's why we are using this finally keyword. And that is where your not finally keyword, your finally method going to be helpful, very helpful for all of us, especially when we have the multiple spinners going on and we really wanted to hide the spinner or we wanted to show the spinner. So now if you click on update record, you could clearly see that there was a spinner coming up in your component itself. And we got the update. The name has been updated to our our account object. So any questions before we go ahead and take the last topic of today's session, that is delete record. Okay. So delete record is also a very important and handy method for us that is really helpful while we wanted to delete a record. Okay. Now, let's say that you have a data table that we would see into the coming videos, and then you have a drop down kind of things, or maybe you have a button here, and on a click of a drop down, you have a delete button, right? Because you will have multiple records here on the data table, and you would have a delete button here, and then on the click of the delete button, you wanted to delete the record. There could be some other scenarios. Maybe you wanted to work on a custom messaging service. When I say messaging service, that means the inbox kind of component you're developing. And then in your inbox, you wanted to provide a delete message, delete functionality. You click on a message, the message is getting deleted from the backend, from the Salesforce. Then this LDS is really, this method, delete record of our LDS is really helpful, really comes handy. And again, is a part of our uiRecord API, just takes a single parameter called record ID, returns the promise that we talked about, then catch and error. So let's go ahead. Maybe I'm going to make the change into the same component, that is LDS update record. So I'll just go ahead, we'll add another button here. And this time the variant of this button is going to be destructive. And the label, we will change it to delete record, and we'll say handle delete click. Let's come to JavaScript, define our method. Event, we'll say event.prevent default. And let's import the method that is delete record. It really takes the record ID. So I will just do the copy paste here. Change the method from update record to delete record. And let's pass the record ID, that is this dot record ID, because this is the record we are going to delete now. So let's go ahead and deploy this. Any confusion, questions, doubts, anything that comes on top of your mind, please don't hesitate to ask. Okay, we've got now delete record. I'm under my account called ApexTrigger2. If I click on delete, looks like there is a problem. That means the account has been deleted. That's why I'm not able to handle it now. And if I try to refresh it, I'll see the same error because the account has been deleted. And maybe if we wanted to make sure if the account has been deleted or not, we could go to recycle bin from these 9 dots. Okay, maybe. Okay, I'm not able to open these 9 dots. You all can hear me, right? Clearly?
Yes.
Okay. Then it's not an internet issue. But yeah, basically you could go to the recycle bin. You could see that the record would be there in the recycle bin with the same name that we deleted. Not sure why it's not opening, or maybe some bandwidth issue on the internet. So before we talk about assignment, I'll maybe take a couple of minutes. If you really have a question, please feel free to ask, because this is really, I'll say, not this, any, basically I would say, concept that we're learning here in for LWC, it's always going to be helpful and easy. I would say easy to learn and very helpful for us. So please go ahead and ask those questions if you have. If not, then it's fine. So let's talk about assignment number 1. That is, you need to create a Lightning Web Component and take the user, take the input from the users to create the contact and account from the same component. Contact must be whenever you're creating a account record, account and contact record, the contact must be related to the account. And you really need to use basically LDS. You don't need to use anything else because we've talked about LDS. So you should be using LDS. Apart from that, apart from LDS, you're not entitled to use anything else. Okay. These are the inputs that you need to take for account object. That is the name. If you want, you can extend it to phone and other information. And if you if you just wanted to use only the name of the account record, that is also fine. Okay. Then for the contact, these are the 4 fields that you really need to take as an input. And then once you're creating a record, like there should be a button. Once you're creating a record, your account should get inserted first, and then your contact should get inserted. And the catch is that your account and contact both should be related with each other. Any questions on this? Okay, no questions. Number 2, you need to create a Lightning Web Component that will be displayed to that will be used to display the lead information in the lead record detail page itself. You need to use uiRecord API to achieve this functionality. We have already seen how you can fetch the information about an object. These are some of the fields that you need to display in your lead record detail page. That includes name, email, title, phone, company, industry, annual revenue, and lead source. This is assignment number 2. In the continuation of assignment number 2 itself, the same component will have a button with the label called edit information. And on the click of that button, the edit form should display with the same information. That means your edit form should display with these 8 fields, and once user makes the changes, clicks on update information, the updated information should get saved within Salesforce lead object. Again, you have to use uiRecord API. Okay. That's what we have for the assignment. Any questions? And yes, assignments will be posted into the Slack channel. Apart from this, any other question? Okay, seems like everyone is good.